One of the features of Sukkot, and there are so many that make this holiday unique and delicious and special, is the reading or chanting of the book of Kohelet, of Ecclesiastes. That is our Megillah, our scroll for this time of the year. And actually, we have to wait until next Shabbat to hear it a little more fully, but we wanted to give an appetizer for some of the amazing and wise messages that are in it. So this morning, going to turn to the great wisdom of one of my most favorite composers of all time and songwriters and singers, Pete Seeger, who took the words from chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, and set it to this memorable and iconic melody. Please sing with me, made famous by the birds, turn, turn, turn. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace. A time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. Last time. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. I'm going to turn the service to my friend and colleague and Bima partner, Cantor Rudy Hasid, who will lead us in the Baruch Hu and the Shema. If you have the virtual Siddur that was sent, it is on the first page or page 246. Cantor Rudy.
Chag Sameach, everyone. We turn to page 247. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or u'melech choshech, oseh shalom u'boreh hakol. We turn to page 277 for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפו בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
So we introduce a little quiet time for Amidah, for Tefillah, for those able, comfortable. The tradition is to stand, and although I'm greeting you from New England, I figured on the West Coast, everybody knows which way is the Pacific. So face the Pacific, turn 180 degrees, and you'll be facing more or less to the east. And the Talmud says, if you don't know which way is which, because we are so disoriented, close your eyes and feel the presence of Jerusalem in your heart. Often share, the rabbi of my childhood used to say, if you're not quite certain what to say, close your eyes. You'll find the words that you need written on the inside of your eyelids. And the traditional words of the Amidah, if you have Siddur Sim Shalom, are on page 123b. And I'm sure my colleagues will share where these words might be found if you are using any other printed text, or see this as a time of prayer service. And we introduce with the enigmatic words because they're in the singular. Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. The Eternal One, Sovereign, open my lips, and our mouths will declare your praise. Adonai Svatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilatecha. We continue quietly, each with our own words.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya
move into the next part of our service. If you're still in the midst of your own prayers, you can find a stopping place gently, or continue as you like. And if you have a Lulav and Etrog with you, please go find them now. And if you're able to, please remain standing. So just I don't know how well you can see me in my virtuality here. So the Lulav and the Etrog are symbolic, of course, and just want to say a word about those symbols before we move into the Hallel prayer. So the Lulav is made of these different species, one of which the palm branch represents our spine, the willow, our lips, our mouths, the hadass, the myrtle, our eyes, and the etrog, our heart. And so part of what we do when we draw all of these together as we move into the ritual of Sukkot is of shaking the lulav, is to just remind ourselves to bring every part of ourselves with us into this new year, to activate our physicality, to activate our hearts. And so if you have a lulav, the custom is to turn the etrog upside down. So this, the pitome, the kind of part that was the blossom, that looks a little bit like a balled up fist, that part starts in the down position, and we say the blessing and then turn it upside up and proceed from there. So we're going to begin with the prayers that are on page, oh, it looks like we didn't give you that page. Oh, no, we did. So we start with the blessing Al-Nateelat Lulav. So again, you turn the etrog upside down, you say the blessing, then you turn it right side up. You put the willow branch to your left, you put the myrtle branch to your right, and everything held together primarily with your right hand. So we'll do those things and then move on through the Hallel service. And again, if you have the Seeger that we sent ahead of time, we're on 354, 355 right now. We're going to make our way through there. And if you happen to have a Kol HaNeshama prayer book at home, same page numbers. Okay, so please rise if you haven't already. And we say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al-Nateelat Lulav. And turn your etrog over. And then we move on to the Shehechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kimanu v'hegianu lazman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kimanu v'hegianu lazman hazeh. Amen. I turn things over to Rudy. Page 357.
Thank you, Rabbi Katie. We're on page 357. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'kro et Hallel. Rabbi Katie.
We move on to page 361, and I'm going to grab my drum for this one. לצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז, לצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז, הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל ממשלותיו, הים רב הינוס הירדן, מסוף לאחור, ההרים רקד וכלים, גבעות כבני צאן, מלך הים קיטנוס, הירדן תיסוב לאחור, ההרים תרקדו חיילים, גבעות כבני צאן, מלפני אדון, חולי ארץ, מלפני אלוה יעקב, ההופכי הצור, אגמיים, חלמיש, למיינו מים. Page 365.
Adonai zecharanu Yevarech et Beit Yisrael, Yevarech et Beit Adon, Yevarech ye Adonai, Hatanim im Hagolim, Yosef Adonai Alechem, Alechem me'avrechem, Beruchim atem Adonai, Ose shamayim ba'aretz, shamayim l'Adonai, Ve'ha'aretz natan livnei Adam, Lo hametim yehaleluya, Ve'lo kol yordei duma, V'anachnu nevarech ya, Me'ata ve'yad olam, Me'ata ve'yad olam, Hallelujah. We turn to page 369.
Adonai, ki ani avdecha, Adonai, ki ani avdecha, ben amatecha, ani avdecha, ben amatecha, ani amatcha, batavadecha, pitachta lemoserai. Adonai, ki ani avdecha, Adonai, ki ani avdecha. Page 371.
Getting ready to shake the Lulav and the Etrog together, which we refer to as shaking the Lulav. When we get there, there are multiple traditions. If you're not holding a Lulav and Etrog, send good and sweet and grateful energies to all corners, to the front, side, back, left, up and down, and let's fill our world with sweet blessings and harmony. Page 371. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim shabechu כל העמים, כי גבר עלינו חסדו ואמת אדוני לעולם הללויה. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם, כי לעולם חסדו, יאמרנה ישראל, כי לעולם, כי לעולם חסדו, יאמרונה בית אהרון, כי לעולם חסדו. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו. יאמרונה ירא אדוני, כי לעולם חסדו. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו.
And we turn page 373, Binet, from the narrow places, the word related to Tsuris we called out, and we were answered b'merchavia from a wide place. Binet karatia anani v'merchavia. Binet karatia anani v'merchavia. Anani v'merchavia. Anani v'merchavia.
And on page 375 from Psalm 118, of course, Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, avovam odeya. Open for me, for all of us, the gates of righteousness and justice. We will enter there and give thanks. Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, avovam odeya. Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, avovam odeya. Zeh hashar l'Adonai, tzadikim yavovo. Zeh hashar l'Adonai, tzadikim yavovo. Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, avovam odeya.
What some see as the heart of Hallel on the following page, the verses that begin Ana, traditionally repeated, page 377, and the melody is of the Spanish-Portuguese community in Europe. Adonai, Adonai, Atzli, Adonai, Atzli,
Okay, thank you. So you may be seated. And we put our Lulav and Etrog gently to the side. And take a breath. Let's just take a breath as we're going to switch gears here. As you may know, one of the themes of our holiday is the theme of hospitality. And of course, the symbol of the Sukkah with its open side is a symbol of being welcoming. And so this morning we've invited a speaker, Marcella White Campbell, who is an Urshalom member and who's also the director of marketing at Bechol Lashon, which strengthens Jewish identity by raising awareness about the ethnic, racial, and cultural diversity of the Jewish people. So we've invited Marcella to come and speak to us about hospitality and inclusion. She is not only the director of marketing at Bechol Lashon, she's also a graduate of Stanford University and a third-generation San Franciscan. She lives in the city with her husband, Greg, and children, Maya and Noah. And Marcella, I'm going to turn things to you. We're so glad to have you with us this morning, and we're eager to hear your teachings.
Thank you. Chag Sameach, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. In addition to what Rabbi Katie was saying, Bechol Lashon brings the historic Jewish commitment to civil rights and racial justice forward into the 21st century. And embracing the historical diversity of the Jewish people, and more importantly, the growing diversity of the community today, is an important step toward securing relevancy in an exciting American future. And at Sukkot, a time when we metaphorically welcome the entire Jewish people into our homes, celebrating that diversity seems more important than ever. The story of the Jewish people is a story of a people on the move, in search of home. Since Abraham, we've traveled the world, settling on every habitable continent. For thousands of years, wherever we land, we have navigated new cultures, new foods, new places, and new people, and have assimilated them into our rituals and our traditions. And they endure. We're a people who are always growing and always changing, but home, a place where we are included, a place where we belong, a place where we feel welcome, is never far from our minds. In our very first story of searching for home, the Israelites wander homeless in the wilderness. They build temporary, rough dwellings called Sukkot in the harsh and unwelcoming desert. Only once they enter the promised land of Israel can they finally plant seeds, put down roots, build permanent homes, and become farmers, not wanderers. Now that they are farmers, the tribes of ancient Israel live in rhythm with the yearly cycle of planting and harvesting. The work is hard and keeps the tribes apart, each tied to their own land and territory for much of the year. But 3 times a year at Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the harvest holidays, all the tribes gather together in Jerusalem. For the rest of the year, they are separated, living their separate lives, divided. During these harvest festivals, they're one people. And Sukkot celebrated that special time between harvest and planting. And the community came together to celebrate give thanks for the successful harvest, and anticipate the rains of the coming season. And the community built temporary huts to commemorate being delivered from rough Sukkot in the harsh desert to the rich bounty of Israel. The destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem changed the nature of the Sukkot celebration. Now that the Jews were driven from the land of Israel, gathering the tribes in Jerusalem was impossible. The people of Israel could no longer come together, and they drifted apart. And yet, despite time and distance, the memory of the joyous celebration of Sukkot never faded. Jews throughout the world continued to build Sukkot just as their ancestors had. The act of welcoming guests into the sukkah came to stand in for the act of gathering the diverse Jewish people in Jerusalem. And to this day, an essential part of the Sukkot experience is hospitality, welcoming guests and sharing meals with them. According to Kabbalistic tradition, we are visited in the sukkah by 7 ushpizin, which is Aramaic for guests: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. And each night, one in particular is honored. The first night honors Abraham the patriarch, whose story illustrates one of Sukkot's central themes, Hatnasat Orechim, welcoming guests. Abraham sits before his tent on a hot and sunny day. It's parched and dusty, and 3 strangers appear before him. Abraham begs them to stop and enjoy his hospitality. He bows low before them, and he rushes to bring them water to wash their feet and bread to break their fast. He offers them a shady, comfortable place to sit. Incidentally, one midrash suggests that then and there, Abraham built the first sukkah for his unexpected guests. Abraham races to his wife and servant, most likely disrupting whatever Sarah is doing at the time, and demanding a feast for their guests. He brings back the best food that he has to offer: a fatted calf, cakes, and milk. And while they eat, he stands and converses with them. These angels are about to share the news that Sarah will soon bear a long-awaited child. But for now, Abraham feeds and honors them without thought of reward. There are good reasons why this story serves as a blueprint for Jewish hospitality. At every step, Abraham displays empathy, sensitivity, and humility. And from the beginning, he never waits for these strangers to presume to ask. He does the asking, inviting them to stop and rest. He tries to anticipate their needs. Guessing that his guests are probably hot, dusty, and hungry, he brings bread and water to wash. He lets them know what resources are available, and he brings them the best of everything. You might say that because Abraham doesn't sit down next to his guests. He gives them space to grow accustomed to him and their surroundings. And given that it can be inferred that Abraham is still recovering from his circumcision, we might even say that he is operating somewhat outside his comfort zone. In every way, Abraham models welcoming as an active verb. He creates a welcome for his guests, the epitome of Haknasat Orchim. He doesn't just provide a space for his guests to make themselves comfortable. He takes specific actions to make his home that way. As the Jewish community continues to grow more and more diverse, and as Jews of color express the myriad ways in which they often feel ignored and excluded, Abraham is often held up as a model for what hospitality in the contemporary Jewish world can look like. His story merges with the story of the wandering Israelites. Ironically, while Abraham famously welcomed strangers into his home, his descendants, the Israelites, will become strangers without homes. But as soon as they finally make a permanent home in Israel, welcoming the stranger becomes not just a virtue, but a mandate. The Torah will remind them, we must welcome the stranger, for we were once strangers in a strange land. At Beholashon, I have a particularly soft spot for our Passport to Peoplehood educational resources, which highlight Jewish diversity throughout history. Jews do not only come from Israel or Eastern Europe or New York. Jews truly come from all over the world. The Ethiopian Jewish community was established centuries before Jews arrived in Eastern Europe. And meanwhile, one of the newest Jewish communities thrives in Uganda. With Passport to Peoplehood, inclusivity is very literal. We include the history and perspectives of diverse Jewish communities whose stories often go untold, particularly in the United States. When we do this, we show them that their stories belong in the greater Jewish narrative. And we show Jews who have been told that they don't look, sound, or act Jewish, that diversity is an essential part of the Jewish experience. And we show Jews from other marginalized groups that their stories deserve to be included too. We've talked about Sukkot in the context of ancient Israel, but today I would also like to include the ancient story of the Binet Israel Jews of India and what it can teach us about welcoming guests. The timing of the arrival of the first Jews of India is a matter of discussion, but it's clear they arrived in ancient times, making them one of the world's oldest Jewish communities. There are multiple historic communities, each with their own origin story, unique customs, and characteristics. The three largest groups were the Baghdadi Jews, the Kochini Jews, and the Binet Israel. The Binet Israel are the oldest and largest group of all, so old that their observances predate Rabbinic Judaism, so they don't celebrate Hanukkah or Purim. From ancient biblical and rabbinic sources, including the Midrash and the Talmud, we know that Jewish traders on the Silk Road traded precious metals, spices, and other goods with India. And the Binet Israel origin story focuses on a group of those traders who sailed towards India. The story tells that one night, their ship was caught in a storm and capsized on jagged rocks. 7 men and 7 women clung to the very rocks that had spelled doom for their ship. Throughout the night, they prayed to Elijah the prophet to save them, and miraculously, they survived. In the morning, locals sailed from the Indian mainland and came to their rescue. They brought the stranded strangers into their village and fed them and offered them shelter. Happy with the welcome they had received, these ancient Jews chose to make India their home. They settled on the western coast, and today most of their descendants live in Israel, but between 6,000 and 10,000 actually still remain in India. Fittingly, given their origin story, the Bnei Israel community has a strong and unique connection to Elijah the prophet, who they call Eliyahu Hanabi, and they say special prayers in his praise. It seems fitting that this community, descended from lost strangers who were welcomed into a new home, would identify with Elijah, who we welcome into our homes every year, and whose face we are meant to recognize in every stranger in need. Long before the Bnei Israel, long before the Exodus, Abraham and Sarah set the example for doing just this, for welcoming the stranger as an honored guest. They make their home a model of welcoming and an oasis of comfort. However, at this time of year, with Rosh Hashanah behind us, a member of the family, whose name is not mentioned while Abraham welcomes the angels, is never far from my mind. 1 year after the angels' arrival, Sarah will have a son, and Hagar, Sarah's slave, will be in exile, sobbing in the desert. Hagar's story contrasts painfully with the story of the angels. At Sarah's instruction, she conceives and bears Abraham's son Ishmael. Then, at Sarah's instigation, Abraham sends Hagar and Ishmael out into the wilderness. Hagar garners no empathy. Her needs are unmet. In a sad mirroring of the angel's first meal, she is cast out of this prosperous household with nothing but bread and water. She wanders homeless, and after divine intervention, passes out of the narrative and is gone. Sometimes it's easier to welcome a stranger into your sukkah than it is to welcome the people who are already inside. Since the murder of George Floyd, as thousands march in the streets for Breonna Taylor, Jews of color, in particular Black Jews, have expressed that for them, racism, exclusion, and microaggressions don't stop at the doors of the synagogue. Jewish communities are looking for solutions, and there is a Jewish framework for this, Haknasat Orchim. Just as Abraham welcomed the strangers, Jewish communities should make Jews of color feel welcome. However, welcoming the stranger can be a problematic framework because Jews of color are not inevitably strangers. We must shift this paradigm. We are not scattered people on the margins. 12% of Jews identify as Jews of color. When you welcome a stranger, you begin with a clean slate. It's much more challenging to try to welcome someone who already feels unwelcome. I think again of Hagar. What if, against divine orders, Abraham had saved her, brought her home, offered her fatted meats and cakes? She would never forget her days in the desert. It would take effort, real effort, for Abraham to win back her trust. Welcoming her would never be enough. Abraham welcomes the angels. He shares everything he has, but the resources, the food, the tent, these things remain Abraham's, as Hagar learns so painfully. Welcome is conditional, and it can be easily revoked. What Jews of color want is not just welcoming, but inclusion. Again, I mean this literally, to be included. When you are included, your presence is a foregone conclusion. You don't have to ask. You are made to understand that you are part of a greater whole. You can't be overlooked because you are always seen and heard. As we wrestle with social and racial justice outside our Jewish communities, we must reevaluate our commitment to social and racial justice within our own community. To do this, the voices of Jews of color must be centered. But this cannot happen if Jews of color don't feel safe sharing their voices for fear that they will face repercussions for rocking the boat, or are made to feel that their perspectives aren't valued in the first place. There can be no trust when you feel that your presence in the group is predicated upon your silence. At Sukkot, Jews gather together to celebrate our deliverance from the harsh desert and the luxury to create a home and build a thriving community. We invite guests into our Sukkot, fulfilling our mandate to welcome the stranger. This year, as you look around your physical and metaphorical sukkah, ask yourself, who feels included and who feels merely tolerated? Who feels seen and who feels like a friend? Who feels like a stranger and who feels like family? Welcoming is a good start. Welcoming will get people inside your sukkah, but inclusivity, showing them that they belong, will get them to stay. Thank you all so much.
Such a gift, Marcella. Thank you. Are you up for a little bit of Q&A?
Sure.
All right. So I'm seeing lots of comments in the chat. Yasher Koach, very, very well said. So we have just a few minutes of time where if people have comments or questions, particularly questions for Marcella, please just go ahead and jump in and unmute yourself, ask your question, and then mute yourself again. Just go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Is it all right? May I speak? Okay, thank you. Marcella, that was a beautiful, beautiful address. I enjoyed every bit of it. I was curious if you're, of course, you're following, what your general feeling about the ethnic studies curriculum is. Where are you stepping in, stepping out? What is your organization? What can it contribute besides an entire curriculum?
I think what we consistently try to do in these conversations is to complicate the narrative. We always want to make sure, the more we complicate things, that's, sort of what we do. But to make sure that people understand that the Jewish people are not a monolith, and that if we do bring the history of Jews into this curriculum, that we will acknowledge the fact that Jews are a diverse people. We think it's very important for people to learn this when they're learning Jewish history and learning about the contributions to Jews to America. So that's generally speaking what we come in is to remind people that that's really important and that all of our voices need to be heard.
So I have a question. It's kind of a two-part question. What do you think is the kind of top or first step in Jewish communities in inclusivity? And in a community like Or Shalom, it's more diverse than the community I grew up in, but there are communities where there aren't any Jews of color. It's like, what do they do? And I know that the sort of default position is for people to think, white Eastern European Jews are Jews, and we know that's not true. And I say we at Or Shalom, that's the community you and I are a part of. And our community doesn't look like that, but many communities do. So what's the first step in a community that doesn't look like Or Shalom?
I would think education. I think one misconception sometimes that we find when we're trying to teach Passport to Peoplehood and trying to teach about the diversity of the Jewish people is that the curriculum is for Jews of color. And so, we will bring the curriculum in to places where there are Jews of color who can benefit from it and who can see themselves in it. That is important, but Passport to Peoplehood should be everywhere. People everywhere should be learning about Jewish diversity just the way they learn about any other part of Jewish history. This is part of the story of our people. And it's not designed only for Jews of color. It's for everyone. And so in some ways, one of the first steps that we can take across the board is for people to realize that and to engage with the stories and the histories of Jews of color and also Jews from around the world. Again, I love to complicate things. And I believe that when we complicate the Jewish story, when we say there isn't just one story where Ashkenazi Jews leave Russia and come to New York, there are many, many stories. The more stories, the better, you know? And so to me, it's a very simple way to get started with dealing with issues of race, issues of identity, is to just start by saying that Jewish identity is much greater than many of us are led to believe.
Yeah, this is more a comment than a question. I think what you're saying is one of the first lessons is the Jewish story is not a monolithic story. I think that's one way in which we're very much like many other ethnic groups. The Black story is not a monolithic story, and the Latino story is not a monolithic story, and the Asian story is not a monolithic story, and Native American story is not monolithic. I think in that way, we're just like every other ethnic group.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that often for people outside the Jewish community, there's one Jewish story, just honestly, it becomes a question of representation, you know, allowing multiple Jewish stories into the mainstream. So yeah, people definitely have the instinct to reduce, you know, all of the attributes of one people, all of the stories into a single story, but, you know, we can't allow that to happen. We have to push back.
Marcella?
Hi.
Ira here. I don't much care for race, except for the race that you and I share, the human race. And I note in the Torah, when it says to love your neighbor, there's no color. But I had a thought the other day, and that thought was about the frequent mention of widows, almana, orphans, yatom, and strangers, ger, singular. You and I, and people outside of the Jewish community, until we know one another, we all share the mantle of strangers, but we are all members of the human race. So my question for you is, am I more to you than a surface? I know my lighting isn't good here, but my race is human race. Don't we have that in common? And if we knew one another better, we'd realize that that's only the beginning. We have much more in common than we do that separates us. What do you think?
Well, what it makes me think in terms of race and in terms of bringing race into the conversation is that we have a concept at Behol Lashon called Jewish and. And the idea is that we're Jewish and, you know, you and I are Jewish. But then there are parts of me that I want to bring with me into the conversation and that I want to bring with me as part of my identity. And in this case, you know, I'm Jewish and Black. It's an important part of my Jewish identity. I don't choose one or choose the other. They're both part of me. So if Jews of color are to feel that they can do that, in one way or another, we have to confront race. When we don't talk about race, it actually doesn't bring peace in the way we would think, because we're asking people to deny parts of themselves. That's still there. Race is still there. Racism is still there. It doesn't go away if we don't look at it. So we think it's better to bring it out into the open and talk about it, and then bridge gaps in that way. Once we talk about it and we come to some resolution, we can bridge gaps between people. But we don't see race as something that separates people, but something that can be part of some of our identity.
If I may just follow up on that. We both know that Jews are not white, since we are not Aryan. We both know a little bit about eugenics. And we both know that all of us as human beings are creatures made out of flesh, fluid, and bones. But at the same time, despite having more than 99% of our DNA in common, there's that little bit of us that makes us unique. Every one of us, we're only one of a kind. And if we can't respect one another on that level, then there's no hope for us. But I think we're better than that. I think that although humanity is not perfection, it leaves room to improve. And when we do that, we don't create bridges, we cross them.
All right, well said, Ira. So does anyone else have another question before we close this? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet?
I just want to say that I really appreciate your comments today. And I think today that's very, very, very important. I think all of us have more than one experience. I was born in Latin America. I can cross both the Hispanic and the Jewish and the American. And I think that we need more opportunities to interact with people of different backgrounds, whether they're Jewish or they're not Jewish. I think a lot of our feelings are because we don't have the opportunity or we don't want to interact with people that are different than us, and that we're only comfortable with people that are like us. And we need to have more opportunities, be it in the schools, which is my background, or just out having a good time when COVID disappears. And so I thank you for all your work. I think it's very, very important.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, of course, more exposure to other people, other experiences, other cultures. There's no real downside. You know, it just helps us to learn and helps us to, you know, bridge gaps.
All right, well, I think this has been very rich, and Marcella, thank you so much for coming and leading us in this thought-provoking beginning conversation. I feel like, you know, we are in this moment in our country where we're seeing that this isn't just a one-shot deal. This isn't just one guest speaker and you check it off and then we're done. It is an ongoing conversation that we need to have within our communities, between our communities, and I love the challenges that you pose and the questions that you're bringing us to consider. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn things now to Rabbi Shana for re-entry into our service.
Yishar kochech, Marcella, thank you so much for enlivening our minds and opening our hearts. Bless you. Beautifully said. Friends, this is the moment in our gathering today where we will offer a prayer for healing, for refuah shlema, for those close to us and those far away physically, but close in our hearts. If you would like, please take this time to enter, if you prefer, a name or some names, and indicate that they are for healing in the chat. And we will hold you and them in our hearts as we offer this blessing, a Misha Berach, based on the words of Rabbi Leah Dobern Shor. O source of blessing, we ask that you be there for us as you were for our ancestors, a pillar in our midst. Help us to turn to you for guidance during these troubled times. Help us to reach out in love and compassion to one another to support those who are ailing, unable to leave their homes, or struggling financially. Be with our doctors and caregivers, our nurses, scientists, firefighters, and all first responders. Offer your compassion, and we pray your healing to all who are ill and in need of your support. Guide our leaders to wise decisions. Help us to find the inner strength to be patient when our nerves are tested. Be our still waters when we are surrounded by fear and worry. Be our rock and be our shelter. As we surrender to the beauty of nature and the fragility of our Sukkot, may this time of our joy be also a time of healing, hope, and peace. Elena refanala, Elena refanalo, Elena refanali, Elena refanalanu, Elena refanala, Elena refanalo, Elena refanali, Elena refanalanu. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will and ours as well.
Amen. Amen. So we're going to shift the use of our chat for a moment. So we have had comments coming in from Marcella's talk, names that we're praying for healing. And now I'm going to invite us to do one more thing with our chat, which is to put in the names of those Ushpizin you would like to invite into our virtual sukkah this morning. So, you know, it is, as Marcella mentioned, it's a tradition to invite certain special guests, celestial guests. They can be people who you know that are alive at a distance or close by. They can be people who have passed on. They can be our ancestors. They can be mythical people. They can be anyone who you find inspiring. So let's just think for a moment and share with each other by chat, who are the people you would like to invite into your sukkah this year? And we will leave that there for a moment, and I invite you to peek at it and just think about bringing in people from all corners of your life or your imagination. So we're going to move along instead of sharing those aloud just because of time concern. But yes, I see Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's top of my list as well. So we can keep those coming as we continue on with our service. And I think our next prayer is not in our prayer books, but many of us know it from the heart. So I'm going to turn things to Cantor Rudy to lead us.
Thank you, Rabbi Katie. We continue with Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'hadon hakol, l'tegidu l'aleyaseh breshit, shelo asanu kegoy ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol amonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ועושה הארץ ומשה יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכיננו זו בגבי מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו וזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשמותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל וארץ וארץ מתחת עינו. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Thank you. So when we're thinking together, we wanted to bring our time together to conclusion with Kaddish Yatom, with Morna's Kaddish. And in the framework of liturgy, Kaddish has likes to have something to invite the words, and a psalm is always adequate, more than that. So at the end of Yom Kippur, we blow the shofar, and that seems to be the end of Teshuvah, except anybody who's lived an academic life, you know that as soon as the deadline comes, I'm both sides of this, as a student, as a professor, can I have an extension, please? So the extension for Teshuvah is immediately granted, and it runs until, depending on your outlook, either Hoshana Rabbah or Shmini Atzeret. And Shmini Atzeret, especially in California, when we say the Tfilat Geshem, a prayer for rain, certainly has a profound sense of judgment and what will be our fate in the future. And the cues are partly in the melody of Geshem, where you hear a reprise of the theme of Na'ilah, and traditionally the Chazan at that time wears a kittel. And we keep reciting Psalm 27 until that final extension. And it's never too late, but at least figuratively. So let me share the words with you for just a moment of this extraordinary psalm. Can everybody see it? So, Adonai Avivi Yishimi Mi'ara, Adonai is my light, salvation. From what need I be afraid? God is the stronghold of my life, whom shall I dread? Even if evil people assail looking to consume me, it is only my enemies and those who besiege me, they will stumble and fall. Even an armed camp arrayed against me, my heart would never have fear. Even if there was a war against me, there is one thing of which I would be sure. An extraordinary phrase. One thing I ask of God, this I seek, to dwell in the house of God all the days of my life. Lachazat b'noam Adonai, to look upon the beauty of the transcendent and to stay in that canopy. Achat shalti me'et Adonai, ota vakesh. Achat shalti me'et Adonai, ota vakesh. Shivti b'beit Adonai, kol yamei chayai, lachazot b'noam Adonai, levaker b'heichalo, lachazot b'noam Adonai, levaker b'heichalo. And coming towards the end, what do we all know? Ki avivimi azavuni, even my father, my mother, they will abandon me. But Adonai yasveni, but it is Adonai, the transcendent, that will gather me. Hareini Adonai darkecha, teach me, Adonai, your ways. V'necheni barach mishor leman shararai, guide me in the paths of being upright, for the sake of those who guide me. Al titneni b'nefesh tzarai, do not give me over to the strength of those who oppose me. Lule hamanti lerat b'tuv Adonai beretz chayim. I have faith that I will see the goodness of the eternal while I am in the land of life. Kavel Adonai, have hope in Adonai. Chazak v'yametz libecha, be strong, strengthen your heart, your very essence. V'kaveh el Adonai, and have hope in Adonai. When we turn to the words of Kaddish, Kaddish doesn't only assert that God is holy. That is in the Kedusha. We say Kadosh, Kadosh. There it is an adjective. The words Yit Kadash, words of an old Beatles song, means let it be. It is a hope that God's sanctity will come to increase. What does that mean? How can God become more holy? Is God not infinitely holy? That might be, but the world is not what God envisioned. I believe the role of Kaddish is we think of those who have built us and who inspire us to build the future. And as we build the future of that vision, that is how we increase divine holiness. So let me invite all of us in time of mourning, anyone who wishes to join in reciting Kaddish. Let me invite for this anyone who wishes, please unmute. It will sound a little chaotic and out of sequence, which means it'll sound like a lot of shuls do once in a while. And for anyone not reciting, those reciting will hear the response. So just for these few moments, please unmute. If you wish, please stand. And we turn to the words of Kaddish Yatam, the Kaddish of eternity. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Rabbi, v'alma divrach yerutei v'yamrich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yamrechon v'chaye dechal beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv v'yemaru, amen. Yehei shamei rabba mevarach, v'alam u'alamei alamayah. Yitbarach v'yitbarach, yithar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh,
Yadar v'yadole,
Yitala,
Refuge,
Leila,
V'shirata,
Tushkata,
Shvachata, V'nehemata, Amen.
Yahei Shlama Rabba,
Omer Rabba K'nei Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, Kol Yisrael,
Osei Shalom,
Amru Amen.
Ya'aseh Shalom,
Hallelujah, Aseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael,
Amen.
Amen.
In the highest of places, bring that peace to us, to all the communities of Israel, to all humanity. We say, Amen, may it be.
Amen.
So we are going to wrap things up in just a moment. And I want to say some thank yous and invite my colleagues to say whatever you'd like to as well as a closing before we sing ourselves out of here. So first of all, thank you so much to Marcella White Campbell, our speaker and teacher. Thank you so much for the work you're doing in the world and for bringing it to all of us this morning. It's really quite meaningful and super relevant, and a really good reminder that all of our good intentions on Yom Kippur of our teshuvah in the heart needs to be manifested in real work in our communities. And so this is one of those fronts where I think our whole country and including our communities have things that we can do to make a difference and make that teshuvah real. So thank you for giving us that path. And thank you to all of our Southside collaborative leaders and rabbis and cantor, and thank you all for being here. I'm sure I'm forgetting something I should be saying of gratitude, but really it's a blessing to just to come together with everyone. Do any of my colleagues, any of the other rabbis have words that you'd like to say before we close with a song?
I want to thank Or Shalom for assembling the virtual Siddur that was made available. Things look easy, but they are not. And extend a formal refuah shlema on behalf of Ner Tamid to Mikey, and may he be back and strumming healthily soon. We would have loved to have him with us today, but thank you so much for working together with us. Rabbi Katie, Rabbi Sammy, Cantor Rudy, and to our boards and presidents and our congregants and friends near and far for being my virtual guests in the Sukkot this morning.
Thanks. Let me share as a newcomer, but I heard that there were challenges last year. I just want to say for Rabbi Shana, it's such a pleasure to see you smiling, sitting in your sukkah, Kenir Bu. May it be the precedent for decades and decades and decades to come. I can't resist. Before Yom Kippur, everybody loves quoting Kol Yisrael Avivim Zel Bazeh. All of it says, all of our fates are co-determined. It's why we pray in the plural. Arev is really a mixture. I really like translating Kol Yisrael Arevim. The Jewish people are just very mixed up. But when we get mixed up with each other, it really adds. So it's a pleasure looking in all of the little Zoom windows and seeing that diversity. It is perhaps one of the most beautiful things we create. Thanks for those who made it possible by your presence.
Okay, so I just thank you, Rabbi Sammy, and it's wonderful to have you with us. Welcome to you as you begin your journey here with us and with B'nai Emunah and BIJ. All right, so we're going to close with a song that is for this holiday, a holiday of joy. I just put the words in the chat. V'samachta b'chagecha v'hayita ach sameach. It's a song of joy, samachta. So please sing along. We'll just start with the nigun so you can learn the melody. Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Ay 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 ay, ya la 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 la. Ay 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 Samata bechagecha ve'ayita ach sameach b'samata bechagecha ve'ayita ach sameach b'samata bechagecha ve'ayita ach sameach b'samata bechagecha ve'ayita ach sameach. Ya la la la, 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 ya la la la. Ay 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 ay, ya la 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 la. Ay 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 ay, ya la 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 la. Chag Sameach, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag
Chag Sameach. Thank you.
Chag Sameach.
Chag
Chag
Sameach.
Sameach. Very good.
Will you say Chag Sameach?
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
Just
Chag Sameach.
beautiful. Just beautiful.
Sameach. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you, Marcella.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. It was wonderful. What a treat.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. 4 rabbis under one sky. Thank you. Certainly got our money's worth.
Take a very broad view of one sky, but
Well, you know, your sky, Rabbi Sammy, is very cold.
yeah, but it's very blue. I wish that all the good qualities of the sky here would spread out there as soon, miraculously. The scientists, I don't really believe in miracles, but you can wish.
Yes, it can't hurt.
Thanks, Samaya.
Thanks, Samaya, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank everyone.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna close it, and we may be able to follow up. I think that my system recorded this, so if anyone's interested, maybe we can let that. We'll try to post that. And thank you, everyone. Take care. Be well, safe and healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well, please. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.